Nancy Andal, and I was in the Mabini in the Philippines, which is Mabini is now it is Davao del Norte, and it is on the southern island of Mindanao, the largest island in the Philippines.
Okay.
The funny story that I also like to tell is the fact that we didn't know him very well. And he knew a secret of the woman who was supposed to be our, quote, companion, because you're given a companion, you know, a local teacher. And this local teacher was having an affair with a married man, and Andy knew this man. So she didn't like the idea that we were going to get to know Andy very well, so she warned us that he wasn't a really good person and really couldn't be trusted. So the one time my roommate got sick and we had to call him, and because she was really sick and we didn't know. We had gone to the theater in the city and we had brought home bed bugs with us, and she was being bitten by the bed bugs and they were making her sick. I don't know why I didn't get sick from them, but she was the one who was, and she was breaking out with a rash and she had chills and fever, and she was, you know, and so we had to call him, and of course the sun gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and sets at 5 o'clock at night, and that's 12 months out of the year because it's that close to the equator. So consequently it was dark when he came, and he said, I need to take a look at your, you know, whatever, and he took her into our little space where the bed was and had her sit down, and, you know, and I was so afraid of him because you know, from what this teacher told, that I actually stood out in the other room with a big butcher knife behind my back, ready to. I said, "You give me the word, and I'll get him. You know, I'll come after him with the butcher knife." I could have killed my own husband, and and then we learned, of course, that he was really a nice person, and then it was only really quite a few months later that, you know, we said, well, why did she tell, you know, then he finally said, well, you know, this is what was going on, and, you know, and she knows that I know, and the whole deal. So anyway, that was September we came there in September, and by Christmas time I did the, you know, here I was, what, 21 years old, 22 years old. You do things when you're stupid 22. I wrote a Christmas card to my parents, and as a PS put, how would you like a Philippine son-in-law? Well, you can imagine my parents were just like, get our kid home, right? You know, they were, because Andy and I were in love, and we were, you know, I was planning to get married, but I was going to wait until my Peace Corps term was up. But unfortunately, in March of '63, we tossed a coin as to who was going to go back to Zamboanga on the plane, which is the other side of the island. By the way, we were on the eastern side, Zamboanga's on the western side, for rest and recreation, and she won the coin toss. She went on rest and recreation, and on the way home, she and Phil Maggard, the two people that were returning back to their places, were killed. Mm-hmm. So at that point, the Peace Corps, in their wonderful wisdom, gave me almost no support at all. And Andy, of course, became my big support because of that. And so, Larry Fuchs, who was the head of the Peace Corps at the time, was a very nice man, but he spent most of his time in Manila. So I said to him, can we get married? Because we know we want to, and he was fine. He was the other people they sent me to the psychiatrist. They, you know, did all sorts of, they were, that I wanted to get married because I was depressed, or I just didn't want to have to leave my village, and I didn't want to have to do the whole thing, and I knew that I could stay if we got married and Andy could move into the Peace Corps house. So that's what happened. We got married. We went up to Manila to get married in June of '63, and we married on June 1st of 1963, and after about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks of going to the embassy and doing all the stuff that we had to do, you know, technically, we then went back to our village. So we got married, and then we, you know, lived in the house. And so I went and did my teaching. I was teaching English as a second language and science to elementary school children. But I also then began to help Andy a little bit because patients would come to our house. So he taught me how to assist him in stitching people up, you know, how to be sort of the nurse to help him that way. And then we delivered babies. It was like 8 o'clock at night, so pitch black, no moonlight. And he comes to the house and says, "Doc, Doc," and he knocks on the side of the house, and you know, it's time to deliver the baby. So we get ourselves out of the house into the Jeep, and we got to drive within about it had to be no more than a quarter mile, but it was a quarter mile through grass that was shoulder high. And I'm like, and the guy's going to lead the way with the lantern, and Andy had a flashlight. And I said, "Oh my God, there are snakes. There have to be snakes." And he said, "Don't worry, the snakes are asleep. Just follow me." So I hung on to his hand, and the husband first, Andy next, and me following the rear through this quarter mile of grass over to the house. We then were at the house for probably about 2 hours before the baby came. And then, of course, we had to go and I thought, oh my God, we have to make the trek back through the grass. And of course, Andy kept saying, "The snakes are asleep, don't worry about it." Luckily, we didn't get bitten or anything like that, because we did have cobras in that area. And we didn't step in anything, and we didn't, you know, so that was my most memorable baby delivery that we had. When I was there, it would have been November of 1963. Andy and I, of course, were married in June. And in October, the teachers told me this story about how they had killed the king of Thailand. And of course, I found out it wasn't true. They'd actually, you know, it was the president of Vietnam who was actually killed that year. And so, you know, I knew that the stories went on. And in November of '63, my husband went across the street to talk to one of the neighbors or something, and came back, and the look on his face, I'll never forget. It was this, and he went, "Don't cry, don't cry." "Well, why shouldn't I cry?" He said, "Because President Kennedy is dead." And I said, "Oh yeah, last month it was the king of Thailand, and now it's President Kennedy, right?" You know. And of course it was right. And then, of course, then we had to try to turn on Voice of America to try to get, and of course we were listening, it was a 12-hour difference. So we were listening at night to some of the activities, including the visit to of Jackie. It was live when Jackie took the children to the Capitol building to visit the casket and all that, and all the descriptions that were going on. But what was most fascinating about that period is the fact, of course, we were very, very upset and depressed because John Kennedy was the reason that I joined the Peace Corps. I mean, I had worked on the Kennedy campaign in 1960. And you know, when he said, you know, "Ask not what your country can do for you," I mean, I was ready to do it. So when the Peace Corps came along, you know, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so we were very depressed over that. But what was so interesting to me is that so many Filipinos said to me at the time, well, Johnson had him assassinated, right, so that he could take over. Because that's the way they felt that the system worked.
Yeah. My name is Andres Andal. I was a rural health physician in Mabini, Davao. When the Peace Corps arrived there, I remember it was one afternoon and there were two girls there. And I met them in the school when they were in the school. But later on, because we live really close to each other, I happened to meet them because they have certain needs, like sometimes they get sick and they will call me for treatment. And eventually we learned to know each other. And so we got married, and she worked as a Peace Corps, and I work as a rural health physician.